No, that's a major problem, and one of the reasons why it's a major problem is also because young captains, second lieutenants and majors, the number of casualties suffered by them in...
Sorry, I also didn't get the question.
The army is having problems while they get a lot of people as soldiers.
Yeah.
As far as the officers are concerned, they're finding a shortage of officers.
13,000 shortfall of 13,000
How many
officers.
13,000. And these are very, very important because please remember that it's second lieutenant to colonel, full colonel, who actually participate in battles. Above colonel, you know, it's different. So their presence in battlefront or in operations becomes of critical importance. So shortage of officers of that rank means that discipline suffers, officer personnel relationships suffer, and the number of cases of fratricides, fragicide, suicides, officer rank clashes that have taken place between is all a result of this breakdown. But this also happens when the army or the security forces are deployed against our own people. They're bound to be. They're bound to degrade and degenerate. It's bound to happen. It's intrinsic. It's given in that situation. For instance, I mean, I haven't referred to it, but war and politics also brings out, I mean, in talking about war, it also brings out very, very clearly the nature of the transformation of India. There was a time when the Indian soldiers who went and fought in Crimea and First World War and came back, realizing, having overcome this racial inferiority which they suffered, they're saying that they could fight as well as a white man, and came back. And the victory of Japan against the Russian it created a great sense of accomplishment amongst a lot of Asiatic people. This was the context within which it happened, and these people traveled. These were the Gadarites. These were also the pioneers of the communist movement. These are the people who went to Russia, etc., etc., etc. That is the history of Indian soldiers at once upon a time. The soldiers today were coming from Kashmir, where they're fighting Kashmiri Muslims. Now imagine a situation where an Indian soldier, there are 600,000 Indian troops in Kashmir, 300,000 Indian army alone, 1,25,000 police and special police officers of J&K who are armed police. And there are another more than 150 to 200,000 at least other paramilitary formation of CRPF, border security forces. So imagine 600,000 troops. There is no other country, there is no other place where you have such a heavy deployment of soldiers. Right? Now imagine when you send, I mean, there are so many questions that come to us. I mean, when they are briefed, these soldiers are briefed and sent. They must be told something. Now, what are they being sent for? Who their enemy is? How they distinguish? Okay? So obviously the brief is that they're fighting a proxy war. It's Pakistan they're fighting, which means that the Kashmiri Muslims become potentially a Pakistani. And our love, Indians' love for an Indian soldier's love for Pakistanis is, everybody knows. If Pakistanis behead Indian soldiers also behead Pakistani soldiers. Act as bestially as we do. I mean, they're the same people. Don't expect anything different from us. We fight in the same brutal fashion against each other. But Kashmir is not a proxy war. It is not a war that has been fomented by Pakistan. It is a war that goes back to 1947 because of the unresolved nature of it and because of the way in which Kashmiris have been treated and a majoritarian have been imposed. Just look at it today. That the NDA government comes up and the only two policies they announce are meant for whom? Kashmiri Pandits and the Jammu Hindus. Kashmiri Muslims who have suffered in the last 25 years are completely out of it. There's not a single thing being done for them. It's a stark factor. You can talk about secularism in India and keep on moaning that BJP has come in. I'm afraid communalism didn't just come with BJP. Even under UPA 1 and 2 it was there. And the state practiced it. We talk about a political party and its formation. I believe that the Indian state is fomenting communalism and encouraging communalism. Look at the social composition of the Indian army. 2% Muslims. and you deploy this force of non-Muslims in a Muslim majority area, and you expect them to treat the civilians with any degree of civility or sensitivity or empathy, especially if you've been told that it's a proxy war you're fighting against Pakistan. There are a lot of issues therefore which that war compels us to address and bring out. And you start looking into things, you start looking into all these issues which we've never raised. Why should we raise the question of representational character of the state institutions? Why is it that the Indian institutions, it's so easy for any government, right-wing government, to come and they suddenly discovered that all the laws, all the institutions are there for them to do whatever they want to, and everybody falls in love. How is it possible? If it doesn't derive its impetus from something that has been created for them in the last 67 years. So it's these very serious issues that when you start looking at it from the question of war and politics, that throws up it takes us into the question. Yes.
So, you talk about politics of war, and I think, to a certain extent, that was what was getting these wars going on all over India, all over the world. But now, as you give an example of Israel and the Israeli defense industries, and so it looks like now it's the economics that's driving all the war.
I'm sorry?
It's the economics of war. The people who are going to benefit, the whole industry that has come about. Maybe that's what is going to be driving all these conflicts in future. Keep the conflict going. There's no point in resolving any conflict because there's more money to be made by having these conflicts going on. I mean, I don't know, in context, for example, Indian Army doesn't want to withdraw from Kashmir. I think they get some benefits for being there, or what exactly is going on, and then the defense industry. So I'm wondering, what is the nature of the defense industry that's coming up in India? What kind of warfare they're engaging, like surveillance, or they're making bombs, or I don't know what exactly. I mean, somebody keeping an eye on what the trends are to kind of see how or the nature of the conflict that will happen in the future, maybe driven by these forces.
No, on the question of economics of war, very little work that has been done, and I think right now I don't think there is a very strong argument that can be made right now on the economics of war. I think the wars that we have been that have been foisted on the people have very clear political origins. And primarily in all the areas of Northeast and Kashmir, it's because of the nation states' reluctance to accept any territorial change. And in fact, India has expanded physically. Its borders, its territory has expanded rather than shrunk, which is a strange thing. So that has been, and Kashmir, see, Naga issue became also as the conflict with China increased in intensity, and our fear, suspicion of China also played a role. So Naga hostiles, they were called Naga hostiles, were seen as a proxy for China virtually, or working as agents of the Chinese Communist Party. So that is the political line. But what you're saying can become a future. You see, this is the first time now, with the participation of the private sector, the possibility of emergence of a military-industrial complex now has become extremely. India is one of the largest importer of arms. So obviously, it makes sense for the Indian state and the Indian ruling classes to advocate that we have to bring down our dependence on the international arms trade. And for obvious reasons. I mean, there are so many examples. I mean, when French sold Exocet missiles to Argentina during the Falklands War, you know what happened? Margaret Thatcher's government put so much pressure on France that France had to share with Britain what is it called, the secret algorithms, I'm not a science, natural science, so
Source
please
code.
correct me. Huh?
Source code.
Source codes. They shared the exhausted missile source code with the British government. So Argentinians couldn't use the exhausted missiles against the British troops. You get my point? So obviously there is an argument that you can make. Now, taking this argument further, Government of India under UPA and UPA 2 was encouraging, and they still have these dreams of encouraging Boeing and Lockheed and others to come to India and establish big military industrial complexes, and also